In times like today, purchasing and reading manga has become much more widespread and more easily accessible. It's easy to see why so many people have become overwhelmed with the excessive amount of manga to choose from. And whilst there are a lot of manga out there that have, rightfully, gained traction and popularity, from the likes of JoJo, Hunter x Hunter, to Bleach and many more, there are still many manga that deserve to gain more readers. So here's my personal manga recommendations list that I feel is well-rounded, suitable for a wide range of audiences, and are stories that I thoroughly enjoy. I find it only fitting to start this list with my all-time favourite manga at the moment. Delicious in Dungeon is a cooking/adventure manga written by Ryo Kukui. Out of all the manga in this compiled list, Delicious in Dungeon is the one that nails every single element of a manga I look out for. Everything from its character designs, emotional storytelling, level designs reinforced by the intricate and well thought out background designs and settings, all the way to the clear influence from fantasy RPGs such as Dungeons and Dragons, and perhaps one of the strongest components of the story, which happens to be vital to the manga's success, the fleshed out main cast. Delicious in Dungeon has one of the most charismatically dumb casts I've ever witnessed, right up there with Golden Kamuy, who not only make for some incredibly effective comedic panels, but help elevate the story's premise through their individual personalities. The beginning of the story follows these four idiots. Actually, let me correct myself there. These three idiots, plus Senshi, as they conquest through many levels of dungeons filled with monsters, creatures, and yeah. The main reason for their conquest being to save Farlin, Laios' sister and Marcel's closest pal, if you will, who, in true Delicious in Dungeon fashion, was eaten by a dragon in one of their previous quests. In fact, being eaten, or just eating in general, is one of the key themes of this narrative, what with it also being a cooking manga. Ryo Kukui does a wonderful job of showcasing the challenges and repercussions of being a dungeon explorer, not only through the troubles of bumping into carnivorous creatures, but the issues of deadly traps, other dangerous travellers, and most predominantly, lack of resources and food. With an onslaught of creatures and monsters, each chapter makes sure to deliver us with a creatively thought out dietary breakdown of all the meals the cast eats, which, most notably, is any creature they come into contact with. Or actually, not just creatures, just anything that moves, much to the grievance of one specific elf. In every chapter, the inclusion of monster cuisine meal plans makes for a fun and unique concept that juxtaposes the severity of the cast's situations, where, if they're not being chased by a rabid animal, their own stupidity and goofiness is putting their own lives at risk. Delicious in Dungeon for me works in the same way as Full Metal Alchemist does. It's recommendable to anyone and anybody due to its accessibility, with fantastic world building, amazing art, a diverse cast of characters, and lack of fan service with great female characters to boot. I'm not really surprised that the people who have read this manga absolutely love it, because you'd have to really nitpick to be harshly critical of the story that Ryo Kukui has created. Number 2 on my list is perhaps my favourite manga being published in Weekly Shonen Jump, Actage, a collaborative piece written by Tatsuya Matsuki and drawn by artist Shiro Uzazaki, who's only 22 years old, making her one of the youngest to work at Shonen Jump. It only makes sense that a newcomer artist in the manga business would be illustrating for a story based on a young actress breaking her way into the acting industry. This young actress being a 16-year-old girl named Kei Yanagi, an older sister who not only tries to make a living for herself and her two younger siblings, but wishes to become an actress. Now, most people's reactions to hearing about an acting manga in a shonen magazine tends to be the standard, really? A manga about acting? Which, yeah. Sure, it's not a story filled with flashy fights or the stereotypical battle pages as seen in most weekly shonen stories, but Actage is still very much filled with the shonen tropes that so many readers are familiar with, plus amazing art to go with it. And if the Promised Neverland's huge success is anything to go by, shonen manga is slowly branching out into different directions that allows the magazine to breathe a little with some variety. Yes, there aren't tournament arcs, but I'd be damned if I didn't say that Yanagi battling through a deadly typhoon just to get a shot needed for a TV series isn't badass, or that the slow progression of Yanagi's acting skills isn't akin to the training arcs we're so familiar with. She may not be building on physical strength, but Yanagi, along with her adorable graphic tees, might I add, continues to grow in mental strength and abilities, allowing her to take on challenges that the acting industry enforces upon her, such as the aftermaths and repercussions of method acting, or even the loss of a loved one. But perhaps my favourite element of the story is the multi-layered rivalry between our main character Yanagi and her foil, Chiyoko Momoshiro. Now, most Shonen Jump stories have a rivalry, as we've seen from the likes of Bakugo and Deku, Naruto and Sasuke, Asta and Yuno. However, for me, Chiyoko and Yanagi's rivalry has become my favourite in Jump, just slipping in front of Haikyuu's Hinata and Kageyama's dynamic, which I also love. What makes their rivalry so intriguing is the way Tatsuya Matsuki has been subtly developing both characters as a result of learning from each other. Whilst their dynamic starts off rocky, both characters are very quickly drawn to each other due to initial interest that only increases when they finally meet. Interest in a person who takes a completely different tactic to a skill they also possess, and wanting to learn more about them. From Yanagi's skill of method acting versus Chiyoko's ability to always accurately give audiences what they want, which she has developed through creating an angel persona everyone has fallen in love with. In a way, both of them have their own powers, if you will. They're very much polar opposites, foils that fit together perfectly, making their rivalry all the more entertaining the further into the story you read, from constantly admiring each other to helping each other unknowingly with their own acting, to going on quote-unquote dates, to building into a rivalry that becomes so heightened that the mere thought of their rival not putting in their 100% effort leads the other to become furious. In some cases, it's less trying to one-up another more than it is trying to keep each other on their toes whilst they both develop, which I'm finding to be a fresh read compared to other Shonen Jump stories at the moment, especially given they're both girls, something that's pretty rare in Jump, honestly. All in all, Actage is a story that not only presents a more uncommon environment to Weekly Shonen Jump's rota, but does so in such a unique way that the arcs feel just as intense as fighting arcs in other battle manga, leaving you waiting constantly every week for more. Plus, did I also mention just how stunning the illustrations are in this manga, or even for the promotional content? I can't wait to see just how far Usasaki's drawing capabilities develop along with this story. Yotsuba is one of the very few manga that I can return to at any point at any time and finish reading with a huge smile on my face. Excluding the first few chapters which introduce us to the main cast, the rest of the manga is very unchronological, and due to the established slice of life themed story, there's no real overall plot, meaning you can happily pick any chapter to choose from and not be swamped by the idea of missing large events. Instead, each chapter gives us a front row seat to the life that is Yotsuba, a curious green-haired 5-year-old girl who has an increasing library of amazing facial expressions. With the great exceptions of, say, Hinamatsuri or Gakushufudo, Yotsuba genuinely makes me laugh out loud, and not the little laugh you give out when watching a viral video. I'm talking cheeks aching and sides hurting kind of laughter. The main reason being Kyoiko Azuma's fantastic use of comedic timing. Whilst there are some written jokes in the story, the biggest laughs come from the onslaught of visual gags that carry through each chapter, from Yotsuba messing around and always dragging someone along with her antics, to the blasé attitude Yotsuba's next door neighbours, the Ayase family, have about a little girl coming to their home constantly and acting like another member of their family. Whilst Yotsuba is the shining star of the series, it's her interactions with the supporting cast that makes for hilarious dialogue and sequences. As an older sister myself, there are so many moments in the manga that reminds me of the experiences with talking and interacting with my own siblings, as Yotsuba's relationships with her father and the surrounding adults completely mimic that of real-life scenarios. From Yotsuba's sporadic experimentations, wild outbursts, hilariously imaginative make-believe scenarios, a dangerous sense of curiosity, and unknowingly doing things she probably shouldn't, because, well, she's a kid. It's not that shocking to learn that Yotsuba is quite well known in Japan. The characters are extremely lovable, and with the combination of heartwarming scenes occasionally thrown into the mix, I couldn't recommend this manga enough. Plus, how could I forget to mention the iconic Yotsuba pose meme that everybody loves? Our Wonderful Days isn't too dissimilar to Yotsuba, in that the main genre is slice of life and has a narrative focused on showcasing the daily lives of the main characters. However, whilst Yotsuba focuses more on comedy, Our Wonderful Days is a slice of life with shoujo in the mix, and presents itself as a comforting iyashike, if anything else. The concept itself isn't the most groundbreaking, however Hamura Kei does a, dare I say, wonderful job at executing the slice of life genre at its best. Following 4 schoolgirls, Koharu, Mafuyu, Nanea and Minori, we see the soothingly mundane lives of the cast as they pursue daily tasks within an episodic fashion, and also develop relationships as the story goes. And that's the one thing I would separate this story from other cute girls doing cute things stories, in that the shoujo I tag isn't there just as a slight tease, as a certain dynamic within the group of 4 does actually develop into something genuinely canon and further than a friendship, though I don't want to give too many spoilers away. Our Wonderful Days is also beautifully crafted. To set the scene and feel of the countryside we see the girls settled in, Hamura Kei takes the opportunity to dedicate certain panels and pages just to the environment alone, or placing the cast in quaint settings that are crafted with the intent of calming the reader. And of course, one of the main attributes to my liking of this manga is the characters. The bubbly styling of the character designs in combination with the cute and charming personalities of each girl makes for an overwhelming feeling of fluff and warmth, much like other similar stories such as Yuru Camp, K-On! And Non Non Biyori. Our Wonderful Days uses the power of friendship to its full potential, allowing for heartwarming, funny and cute scenes between the girls that leaves you with a smile on your face after each chapter. For me personally, the continuous use of adorable facial expressions was one of the charming points of the manga. They're just so expressive and infectious from page to page. As the story is finished with only 18 chapters long, it works nice as a short story to add to anyone's reading list. If you're looking for something to calm you down, get settled with in the comfort of your own home, or just something different to the more intense manga you may be reading, Our Wonderful Days is a perfect choice. Commitment, drive, and passion. These are the 3 words that come to mind when reading Blue Orchestra, a lesser-known manga that manages to filter its way into my heart through a visual plethora of whimsically beautiful panels that so fluidly resonate and translate the beauty of music. There can be many obstacles when translating certain elements onto pen and paper, and music, in particular, being an invisible source of information we gather daily. So, how can we see sound? Well, technically we can't. However, Akui Makoto comes strikingly close to recreating a sound we can't see. For instance, music isn't just in the audible notions some people may hear on a day-to-day basis. Music can be read through electromagnetic wavelengths and music sheets, or felt through vibrations. Blue Orchestra showcases that music isn't merely a simple matter of hearing sound, but the emotions and raw ability that goes into creating pieces that evoke a certain emotion within hundreds of people. Or in this story's case, a main person in particular, ex-prodigy violinist Aono Hajime. In all honesty, Aono wasn't particularly interesting to me as a character right from the start. It's not to say I found him terrible, but somewhat of a replica of the isolated teenager with emo hair trope that is so popularly used across manga.
However, much like any orchestral piece, it's not just one person needed to create a sumptuous ensemble of music. It's the balance and combinations of other sectors. It's the percussions, the wind and brass instruments, the efforts of the conductor, and the strings. The story may start with Auno's internal battle of his intense resolve versus his emotional barrier to continue playing the violin, showcasing the harsh cruelty of experiencing something that, in effect, turns us off an activity or hobby that we once loved. But the story shines for the introduction of other cast members and the camaraderie that slowly starts to form around Auno. The narrative develops as we see him building across his own insecurities and experiences that were holding him back, and finding the beauty and inspiration of playing the violin through hearing Akane, a newcomer violinist who plays with the utmost passion that even some pro players would be envious of. It's her conviction to music and the idealisms of challenging and improving herself despite the low skill she starts at that becomes a driving force for Auno and his journey, leading them both to work and study hard to enter a high school well known for its prestigiously successful orchestra club. And it's the moment they enter the orchestra club that the melody of the story, if you will, truly starts to form. We see Auno and Akane grow as they expand their skills through performing amongst other talented musicians and classmates, finding rivalries who continuously help them better their own techniques and approaches to performing, to feeling inspired by the third years who have practiced and refined their musical talents, to growing relationships that they lacked in their previous school, and actually feeling like a member of something, rather than an outsider. In many ways, the orchestra club became the heart and soul of the story, and was the true stepping stone from me finding the manga relatively entertaining, to a manga I outright fell in love with, and having to eagerly yet painstakingly wait for every new chapter. As you've probably noticed through this segment, Akui Makoto held back no punches when illustrating this story, and is truly able to showcase the different ways in which music can be seen, through the elegance of a smooth and rich piece that defines the tranquility of the violin, to the juxtaposed and calculated erratic sense of intensity that can consume musicians when they are truly engaged in a musical score. Blue Orchestra is a story that demonstrates accumulations of efforts that come together to create a piece so beautifully crafted from teamwork and trust. Music isn't just limited to what you hear, but the joy in memories created from the camaraderie of an orchestral performance.
I knew I was going to fall in love with Skip to Loafer just from the introduction of Mitsumi alone. In many ways, she reminds me of Best Boy Mob from Mob Psycho. They both have an innocence to their character which really makes you root for their goals and desires, and on top of that are able to have such a positive impact on the rest of the cast, their sense of drive and compassion being infectious with every chapter. Skip to Loafer begins with the introduction of Mitsumi, a 15-year-old who starts the story having moved all the way from the Ishikawa prefecture to Tokyo, travelling from the countryside where she's familiar with all her close friends and family, and taking the leap to the new busy city life of Tokyo. Whilst the first chapter does begin with the "I'm late for school" cliché, it does establish two things that spiked my interest. The first being Mitsumi's personality, which I find to be hilariously adorable, but just as interesting to me was her solidified self-assurance of knowing exactly what she wants to do. Mitsumi's overall goal throughout this manga is actually one of the most mature I've read from any main character, especially in this genre. Through her own decision, she takes the risk of moving so many miles away from home because her end goal is to graduate and become a significant enough figure to help and aid her hometown, which is suffering from depopulation, a legitimate problem in many parts of Japan, where many rural towns have been disappearing as a consequence. The other establishment which solidified my interest in the manga was the introduction of the second main character and the foil to Mitsumi, Sosuke Shima. Similarly to Kimi ni Todoke, which is also one of the few romance manga I enjoy, the male interest is genuinely just a good and kind person. He never once belittles Mitsumi and always genuinely listens to what she has to say. He never tells her what she should do, but instead sits back and finds entertainment out of the quirky personality that Mitsumi emits. Of course, he does follow certain male character traits in romance stories, like being popular and good looking, but he never really takes those things to heart, and you can tell he much prefers valuing friendships and bonds over anything else, and is finally happy to be able to confide in someone. Mitsumi and Shima's relationship is, obviously, the core relationship of the story. Their dynamic is one of the sweetest that I've read in recent memory, and with no unnecessary or frustrating drama, but plenty of heartwarming scenes. And of course the painful fulfillment of watching an adorable main character realising she may have a crush on the guy. So extra points to slow burn. I'd also like to point out that I love the way Takamatsu Misaki draws Mitsumi and Shima's interactions, specifically the character's emotions and facial features. The way she can transform genuinely hilarious and goofy faces to panels where you can rightfully see and feel the raw emotions the characters are going through, without any words or special effects needed. Moving outside of the main characters and the art, Skip to Loafer also has an extremely charming cast overall. I mentioned earlier that Shima is very smitten with Mitsumi's personality, but I could argue that that also extends to the rest of the characters she interacts with. Personally, one of my favourite characters is Nao, Mitsumi's auntie. With Mitsumi having moved away from home, it only makes sense that her auntie would offer to look after her when she lives in Tokyo. It's such a nice change to have a lovely guardian who looks out for and cares for the main character continuously, and having interactions with each other that actually feel more genuine, like putting on face masks together or going clothes shopping. Of course, another thing that makes me extremely happy is that Nao is a trans woman, and God, if that isn't such a nice example of how easy it is to include trans people in stories such as this, without the use of dead naming, misgendering or fetishism. I'm looking at you, lovely Complex. Her gender identity doesn't take up her whole character, and she feels just as real and well written as the rest of the cast. Whilst on that topic, other members of the main cast include Mika, Makoto and Yuzuki, which already makes for quite a change, as I'm not really used to so many main female characters in a romance manga without there being male love interest counterparts, of which there aren't any. Instead, we see 4 girls from very different backgrounds with completely different personalities coming together and forming friendships. Just girls hanging out without there being any malice or jealousy. I will be fair and say that at the beginning of the manga, there were red flags to suggest a potential jealousy story with Mika and her views on Shima and Mitsumi, but thankfully instead that was something that became a development point within her character. Rather, we see Mika slowly become even more conscious of her decisions and self-reflective on how she'd been treating Mitsumi in order to get on Shima's good side. It takes a nudge from Shima himself, and even now, for her to judge her own actions and instead take a step back and slightly lower her walls to Mitsumi. Though, I'd argue, it'd be hard not to be won over by this face anyways. Which leaves us with just 2 characters, Makoto and Yuzuki. Funnily enough, their characters are quite intertwined within this story, as their relationship is also one that develops from the beginning, with Yuzuki being almost similar to Shima in that she's the popular blonde beauty, contrasting with Makoto's closed-off, socially awkward personality. Very cliched, but much like the rest of Skip to Loafer, is laid out and developed where, if anything, the archetypes they both fit into becomes the opposite the further you read. As we see, Makoto's nerdy-like characteristics are often debunked during panels where she easily gets agitated at anything, or shows a blasé attitude to score tasks. In contrast with Yuzuki, a character that would fit the snooty posh girl archetype if it had been a different manga, but is instead fleshed out and shown to be one of the most self-conscious of the group, along with Mika, explaining how her appearance often gives out interpretations of her personality that are built on stereotypes. And through these contrasts, from what starts as an awkward first few interactions where Makoto was intimidated by Yuzuki and her popular status, actually becomes one of the closest friendships in the story, where they're constantly at each other's sides. What ties them all together, however, is one person in particular, Mitsumi. It's her determination in volleyball and consciousness of seeking out the good in people that changes Mika's views on Mitsumi. It's also Mitsumi's more physical approach of kindness and welcoming nature that allows Makoto to open up to more people than she ever had before. And it's Mitsumi's earnestly open personality that instantly brings joy to Yuzuki, constantly making her laugh and becoming a good friend to her almost instantaneously. There are other attributes to the manga I adore, like the involvement of the upper senpais and their interactions with Mitsumi too, seeing how they're both influential and caring to Mitsumi whilst also learning from her themselves. Skip to Loafer isn't currently published in English, and it's not as popular as it deserves to be, so I applaud that more people give this manga a try. It only has 17 chapters at the time of recording this, and it definitely makes for an incredibly wholesome read. Thanks for watching, and if you somehow managed to sit through all of my talking, then big kudos to you. And if this video has actually convinced you to read any of these manga, let me know in the comments. I'm always up for a good manga discussion.